You've heard of them. Debt Snowball, Debt Avalanche. Which one works better?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I'm super excited about this show because I think this may be one where we ruffle a few feathers because we're going to share some thoughts and ideas. I think they're going to go against the grain of what a lot of folks out there have been taught about the best way to approach getting out of debt, getting your debt paid off, knocking it out, retiring it. Because I think that maybe our opinion is a little bit different than maybe popular opinion out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. And before we kind of give you the answer, because we have loaded this thing up with math, because I don't like just giving opinions. I want us to kind of go pull out the Excel spreadsheets. Let's go deep on this thing, and let's give it the extra attention that you just don't see in a lot of other places. So that's coming up. But I first want to kind of set the stage with understanding that America has a debt issue. And this is one of those things where, guys, the sooner you realize, you have to figure out, are you a builder of wealth? Or are you just a consumer of resources and you use debt to build that bridge to get you where you want kind of before you're actually ready? And that, by the way, when you build that bridge, it's dangerous.
Now, sometimes, right, in our financial lives, we have to go into debt. Maybe we're buying our first automobile or making a home purchase. And other times it's voluntary. We might be buying something at a retailer. We might be running up credit card debt. Either way, most of us at some point in our life are going to be faced with the decision of what's the best way to get rid of it? How do I want to pay it off? What's the best mechanism? So I think that even though we predominantly talk to financial mutants who don't generally, even though America has a debt problem, they might not have a debt problem. There's probably going to be a season in their life or the life of someone that they interact with where this will be valuable, helpful information for them.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, even financial mutants, when you're starting out and trying to build your toolbox of knowledge of what to do with your money, you could also fall prey. So we're trying to help everybody understand, know where money is used, how to grow it, and how not to fall in the traps. And debt's one of those big ones to avoid.
Now, I think this is a bit of an alarming stat because FTE Daniel pulled this up for us, and this is what he found. The average American, this is from data compiled by Northwestern Mutual, the average American now has $26,621 in personal debt, and that excludes the mortgage. The average person's walking around out there with almost $27,000 that they owe to someone else for something they've purchased.
Yeah, and I think you've said it, but I think it's worth repeating, excluding mortgages. Because when you see bigger numbers where you're getting into 5 digits, you're like, well, anything, that's not just credit cards. That's not just car loans, is it? No, let's get into why this is a problem. And part of what I don't like about it is that you learn very early, or at least hopefully if you're watching the Money Guy content, we talk about how easy it is to create financial independence and success with the 3 components of wealth building, which is basically discipline, that deferred gratification that creates margin, meaning you have to live on less than you make. And then you think about from there, you actually create money, because that's what that margin is. It's money so that you can invest the margin, the extra, and then hopefully you have enough time to let those assets grow, your army of dollar bills. The problem is debt works against all 3 of those. Because if you're using debt, especially for lifestyle, that means you didn't create margin. That means you actually exceeded what you made. You used debt to kind of bridge the gap. So you never got to invest the money. And you definitely, if you didn't get to invest the money, you don't have the time to let it grow. You might actually be turning compound interest upside down.
That's exactly right. It can be the 8th wonder of the world that can be wind at your back when it comes to wealth building and building towards financial independence, or it can be the headwind that you're going to fight against your entire financial life if you don't get it under control early on.
So I saw this on Twitter. Brian is, obviously a friend of the show. We communicate back and forth with each other, and I say something to this effect on the show, but I was like, why didn't I create this? I mean, Brian did a really good job because there is a choice being made. Do you want to be a builder of assets, or do you want to make the banks rich? That's the perfect illustration here. So choose accordingly and be wise with this.
Now, here's the truth of the matter. In our day job, we get to work with successful people all over the country. We're fee-only financial advisors, and we work with a lot of millionaire families out there. And one thing that I think is so interesting is that most millionaires, most folks who've been able to build and accumulate wealth, don't have debt issues. They fall into the other camp. They're not the type that ends up getting themselves behind the 8 ball of having compound interest work against them.
Yeah, it is. I think it breaks. People have a misconception about that. They come to a financial advisor and expect you to be an expert on bankruptcy, to understand how to get out of credit card debt and other things. And guys, it's just not the fact. It's not the way the world works. If you're a financial mutant, you will come to a point to realize people who are, going to make good decisions with the money don't struggle with basic discipline matters. Now, look, that's not a condemnation on anybody who is struggling, because we've all been young, we've all been without money and resources. I'm just telling you, don't fall prey and go, especially the consumerism with all the ad campaigns, all the discussions, all the voices with friends and relatives, where they act like it's completely okay to be in debt. That is not the case if you plan on taking your finances to the next level.
So, okay, before we can talk about, the best ways to get out of debt, how to actually satisfy debt, let's talk about some of the most common types of debt that we see, some of the things that Americans most often fall in the trap of. And the first one that sort of immediately comes to my mind is credit cards.
Yeah.
Right now, according to data compiled by Experian and Clever, the average American with credit card debt at this present moment owes over $5,000, $5,300 in credit card debt.
I want to make sure I clarify this, because this stuff sits out there on YouTube or out there wherever you download your podcast. This is people who are with credit card debt, meaning they're not paying it off monthly. But this means that people actually have $5,300 worth of debt. And then here's a stat that kind of blew my mind, because it's very quickly approaching 50%. 47% of households carry credit card debt.
See, now, one of the money guide tenets that we talk about all the time is we have no issue with folks using credit cards.
Yeah.
We actually encourage that. We think it can be a benefit to your financial life. But carrying the balance is a no-no. It's just something you cannot do. I am amazed by the fact that almost half of the population is getting that wrong. Almost half the population does not pay it off every single month. And I think that is terrifying, first of all, and also kind of saddening.
Now, here's what's interesting. We've come through the pandemic because people couldn't travel, spending was kind of cut down, and then there's also been all this stimulus money that's been pushed out into the economy. A lot of these numbers are actually healthier than they historically have been.
So they've improved from previous
years. Because a lot of money's been put in the system. I think this is a good point. If you have struggled with credit card debt, but you've gotten the stimulus money, you've also been able to kind of reset your own personal consumption because you haven't been able to do stuff. Let this be the ground zero to kind of set yourself up for success going forward, because this could be a positive moment here.
And the second type of debt that we often see is consumer credit. Like you go to the local big box retailer, local electronics store, and you buy something, you have a credit card specifically with that retailer.
Yeah, and the way these things typically happen, I mean, I don't care if you go to Kohl's, your favorite electronics store.
Nordstrom,
I mean,
Target.
it doesn't even have to, it can be your coffee shop these days. I mean, you just go, mobile app is going to be pushing this. Everybody's trying to sell their corporate card, and they'll give you some type of incentive. If it's at a furniture store, they're going to offer you 10% off. They'll give you bonus points if it's through your coffee app. All these things have this incentive, and you might be caught in a moment of weakness and think that the discount is worth you opening another credit card. Guys, I'm going or store credit. I will tell you, be very careful with this. I have my own experience shares on this, is that 10% sometimes is not worth it if you're not communicating it with the other people in your household, because those discounts can be...
It sounds like you're saying that from personal experience.
Yeah, we've had credit card, a store credit that was opened earlier in our marriage that resulted in some late fees and interest and other things. And then also, I can tell you from a knucklehead mistake I made, I went because I was so excited with my first house purchase that we bought furniture, and when they, and it's a few $1,000s worth of furniture, so when they offered me 10%, I'm like,
that's real money.
I'm like, that's a few $100s I could save right there. Not realizing, since I had not closed on the house yet, that ding to the credit, it did have an impact on my credit score. So be very careful on how many different credit accounts, including store cards, that you're opening up out there.
Now, don't mishear us. We're not suggesting, don't ever have a store card. If there are stores that you frequently shop at and that you use, then the benefits make sense for your situation, that's okay. You should still pay them off every month. We're not saying don't use them at all. What we're saying is you want to be careful of opening one up at every store you go to try to accumulate the discounts, when in reality, those discounts may cost you more over the long term than you realize.
I want you to be very deliberate with how you use your credit. I mean, there's a reason. Look, we have in the background a credit score that is running on you at all times. There's also, look, there's crooks that try to use your credit. So we recommend, I actually like the thought of freezing your credit through the 3 credit bureaus, because that also makes you much more deliberate with anytime you want to open a new credit line, you have to go unfreeze your credit from those credit bureaus. Man, that makes you, talking about measuring twice, cutting once, I like that extra layer. By the way, it's instantaneous, so it's not a big deal, but it does allow you to be a little more deliberate and take the emotionality out of the entire process.
A third type of non-mortgage debt that we often see folks get themselves in trouble with are auto loans.
Yeah.
We all love the big, shiny new automobile. It's something that everyone can see. There's safety features. There's new technology. But what I thought was really alarming is when Daniel was pulling these stats, we found that the average auto loan term for new vehicles right now is 72 months. I think that's just absolutely insane, because I know a lot of folks don't even drive cars for that long. So it's insane that people are borrowing for a longer period of time than they actually even own the automobile.
I think the stats are even worse than this, because when I was like, oh, the 72 months. People aren't. They realize you divide that by 72 by 12. I mean, we're talking about 6 years here, and I just, when you want to have the optimistic goal of you're driving your cars at least a decade, you're going ahead and locking yourself in when you do this type of debt. And we know that's not even the behavior of the typical consumer, but I think it's even worse. Only 26% of new car loans are for 5 years or less.
And so that that flies in the face of all kinds of advice that we could give, because even 5 years, I think, is realistically probably too long to try to finance an automobile.
Well, and here's why. Let's give you a clue on this, on why auto loans are disasters. Cars depreciate. I mean, the moment you buy a vehicle, it depreciates really quickly, to the point that you really, if you were optimizing your cash flow situations, you typically don't want to buy a car until it's used for 3 or 4 years, so somebody else is paying that 40 to 50% of the depreciation out there. So these are not appreciating assets unless we're talking about like a 1967 Camaro or something. Everybody always throws out those antique cars as the exception to the rule.
But are you really financing that for 72
nobody's
months?
doing that. So I'm just telling you, be very careful with with cars, and that's why we put the guidance of 23.8. It's something that you really ought to be aware of, so you don't get yourself in that type of situation.
And one way that we know folks aren't subscribing to 23.8, where you put 20% down and you don't finance for any longer than 3 years, and you don't let your car payment exceed more than 8% of your monthly gross income, we know that people are falling short on that, because the average amount financed for new car purchases in this country right now is $35,228. You can look at the average income for the average American in this country. You can see we are way off from 23.8 affordability.
And, we've done so many shows on net worth by age or 401k savings by age. How many 20 and 30-somethings don't even have $35,000 in their investment accounts, but yet they have a loan for $35,000 that's working against them? That's why we do add on top of 23.8. If your car payment is is more than your investments, you're doing it all wrong.
Right.
You always want your investment cash flow, what's going out for your future self, to be better and greater than what you're spending on your depreciating asset.
And then sort of the last non-mortgage debt that we feel like is super, super commonplace these days are ones that I think a lot of folks feel like they can't avoid, right? I have to do this. This is something. It's not even really debt. It's an investment in my future well-being. And of course, we're talking about student loans.
Yeah, and student loans, they still get classified, what's called loosely good debt. Mortgages, student loans, these things are considered good debt in the fact that you're investing in something that's either appreciating or it's going to make you a better version of yourself. But I think there ought to be an asterisk next to that, because, watching some of the documentaries and other things on student loan debts, we do have a crisis in a lot of ways, is because We've expanded how many majors there are out there. We've increased the cost of education tremendously. And then the way that that has all been bridged is they just let young people and parents just sign off and take on more debt.
Yep.
And that seems like a simple solution, especially when you say good debt, because you think, what could go wrong with this? What can go wrong is when you take on more debt than economically feasible for you to pay off. And that happens when you have jobs that their first year starting salary is not even 10 years in the future, your salary is not going to come close to covering the 6 figures of student loan debt that you built up over the years. So we've actually created some guidelines on this. Here's what we'd recommend. Don't take on more student loan debt than what your first year salary will be right out of college.
Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice, because we know that the class of 2019 graduated with an average of $29,900 in student loan debt. And that's the average. That means that half of the folks that graduated had more than that, had a larger amount than that. We all know when we first come out of our career or out of college and start our careers, we don't always start at the top of the pay scale. So if you already start and you're $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt, it's going to take you years upon years upon years just to get back to break even. So if there are ways that you can contain that you can keep that number down, you certainly want to do that so you can get to actually building wealth a lot sooner.
Well, we know that the habits of highly effective people begin with the end in mind. I would encourage you, if you're a grandparent, parent, or you're a student yourself, think about what you actually want to do for a living. Go look at the majors that actually generate the highest incomes, that also pay back student loan debt the easiest. I mean, I would look at that. And then also go look at how powerful it is to consider doing community college your first 2 years. In some states, that's actually even highly subsidized.
Because the only name that goes on the diploma is the one that you ended at, right? It doesn't say, oh, well, I got a degree from University of Georgia, but first 2 years were in community college. It doesn't do that. You just want to make sure that the place you graduate from has the name on there. It might not be worth paying the exorbitant price tag for those early core curriculum classes.
Well, that's why I would have a 360 approach, meaning you're looking at the big picture all the way around when you're comparing whether it's community college, state schools, trade schools, or then the private schools. Just make sure, like I said, begin with the end in mind so that you don't go to some expensive private school, but you end up with a salary that just is not going to be economically feasible for what you're trying to do. Just be very aware of that, because I think that is something that people fall in a big trap on, because good debt can be bad for your financial life if you don't do it properly.
All right, so we've covered sort of the different types of debt that you might have or that you might come into contact with. Now let's talk about some strategies for paying off debt. And really, when we're talking about strategies, there are sort of 2 main strategies we want to focus on. The first is the debt snowball, and the second is the debt avalanche. You may have heard of these or not heard of these, so whenever we introduce new vocabulary, we like to do definitions for you. So when we talk about a debt snowball, it's simply when you pay off your debts in order of the smallest to largest. So whichever one of your balances is the lowest, you want to pay that one off. And I think, Brian, the general idea behind this one is it is behavioral. It wants people to get excited about satisfying that debt so that they keep going. It gives some little early wins early on, right?
Well, we know keeping habits is hard. I mean, especially when you're starting out and you've got a past of bad behavior. Now you're trying to transition to good behavior. I think the methodology or the reason on this makes complete sense is because there are some people that are so broken in the way they've processed their financial decision making that getting some wins early and often can probably keep them on the track of success. But that doesn't mean that's the best for everyone. I think that's what's always very important when you're talking about where you get your information from, is make sure that the information reflects who you are and how you process the financial world, because this is great for people who are debtaholics, who cannot keep themselves straight, who can't get out of their own way. But if you're more of the financial mutant status, there could be an alternative for you.
Yeah, the second method of debt payment is known as the debt avalanche. And this is quite simply where you allocate any extra repayment of funds to the debt with the highest interest rate. So you don't really care about the size of the balances, you care about the interest rates, and you want to pay off the highest interest rates first, all the way down to the lowest interest rates. So what that does, that allows your marginal cost of each dollar to be as impactful as possible when you're satisfying that debt.
Yeah, so this is math optimization is what this is. When you're doing the Avalanche, it means we're listing all of our debts, and we're saying which one of these suckers is really sidelining my growth because I'm paying a much higher interest rate than all the others. The problem, I think, and this is where the behavioral people go back to the snowball, is that what happens if that's one of your debts that's a little bigger in size and you don't get that quick behavioral boost.
Sure.
So it does fall into, it's counting on you to be good at math, be disciplined, and want to pay off those high interest debts first.
So then the next question is, which is better, the Avalanche or the Snowball? How do you decide which one makes the most sense for you? And you kind of said it's very much an individual behavioral decision. And then does it even matter? Does it even make a difference? Or are they both good and you'll be in the same spot no matter which way you go?
Wait a minute. I smell it. I see a case study coming our way. And I bet Daniel has some great clip art because he gets so excited showing us his different clip art that he's put together. Let's look at what Daniel's created so we can kind of look at the details of the math of this.
So this is what we want to put together. We're going to look at two different debtors, and Daniel has called this a tale of two debtors. We've got Snowball Sam, who's going to do the debt snowball, and we have Avalanche Abigail. I love his naming.
What you don't know is Abigail had a cane the first time I saw this. And I was like, why does Abigail have a cane? He goes, oh, let me see if I can mix this up.
Oh, good. I'm glad he took her cane away and gave her a book. So obviously Sam is going to follow the snowball method, and he's going to prioritize the smallest debts first. He's going to look at the smallest balances and knock those out first. Abigail is going to pay off the debt with the highest interest rate first. So let's assume they both have the same debts. And let's assume that their debts are $5,000 from a local retailer, and the current interest rate on that is about 1.9%.
That sounds like a teaser rate.
That's a teaser rate is what it sounds like. Let's assume that their second is a $6,000 debt on a credit card. Ooh, but this one is at 19.99%, which is pretty scary when you think about how high that interest rate is. And then they have a third credit card where they owe $7,500, but this one's actually at 29.99%.
Now, here's what I think is interesting, and I know we'll come back to it. I didn't believe that there's actually 29.9%, but I'll let you prove me wrong in a minute.
And so let's say that they have a $200 extra per month that they can put towards paying their debt. You know, Snowball Sam is going to do the snowball, and Abigail Avalanche is going to do the avalanche. And we're going to see how they differ, how it comes out. Now, you did ask a question, Brian. Well, at 29,
I didn't believe it.
Average APR is somewhere between 17 and 18. 29 doesn't really exist. That's what you were saying pre-show, right?
I was like, think about this. Guys, every dollar you save and work, I get excited about, and you guys troll me when I talk about 20-somethings could potentially get 9 to 10% compounded growth.
Yep.
You guys are like, where is that? I've never seen that. Meanwhile, I find out there's a whole section of the population out there that's paying 30% per year to a credit card. They're having, we're leveraging out how much opportunity is being squandered here with high interest rates. So Daniel had to go show me, yes, this does indeed exist.
Yeah, so we actually went out and found two credit cards that currently have APRs of 29.99%. It also looks like they have monthly fees after the first year. So these are just not the ideal credit cards that you want to get. But you know what the good news is? You got cash back. 1 to 3% cash back. But these actually do exist out there. So one of the things you really want to check on is maybe the card that you're utilizing early on, if it does have an annual fee or it has a higher interest rate or there are other benefits it doesn't have, and maybe you've had it for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, now might not be a horrible time to revisit that. Theoretically, you should not care a ton about the interest rate because, remember, you're not going to carry a balance, but it's not uncommon for you to have better access to better credit cards later in life on your financial journey.
I also want to draw attention. This is something I don't like that the financial industry does. the worse you are with your money, the more they're going to penalize
That's
you.
exactly right.
So, because the only people that would be willing to pay a monthly fee on a credit card and then pay a 29.9% are obviously people who have struggled with good decision making with their personal finances. So, this is going to just pile on top. You're going to layer, instead of good things happening for you financially, the army of dollar bills and compounding interest is actually against
That's
you.
right.
So, you need to quickly realize this is all going to come down to, how do you want to be viewed by the banks and others? Do you want to be a partner that they're trying to throw things your way so that you can be successful and win with low interest rates, low insurance rates, and other things? Or do you want to be that where they prey upon you, that predatory lending where they jack up your rates, they charge you all kind of fees? Be mindful. Start trying to figure out, how do we build the deferred gratification? How do we get the discipline to live on less than we make so we never get in this type of situation?
So let's take a look and see how Sam and Abigail did. Remember, they're both going to pay $200 a month towards satisfying their debt. And Sam, who went with the snowball approach, would have ended up paying $29,806 in total, paying off all the debt plus all the interest that accrued, and it would have taken him about 5.6 years to get that paid off. Now, Abigail, on the other hand, who went with the Avalanche method, paying the highest interest rate first and working her way to the lowest, well, she would have actually only paid $25,223 in total debt payment and interest, and she would have had it paid off in 4.7 years, almost a full year earlier than Sam.
So here's what I think is also interesting on this. Remember, the setup is they're paying the minimum plus the $200, and they had the same debts. So incrementally, these are the same dollars going in. It's not like we ignored one concept on another. This is incrementally, $1 is the same as this dollar. It's just, how did they actually allocate the money? And I'm just shocked, because if you look at this, and there's a reason Abigail is basically doing a dance move,
She's dancing.
is because she gained a year that she actually was not under the thumb of the debtors, and then she also gained about 2/3 of what a Roth IRA contribution could be. So those two things together, man, it is powerful to understand where you are from a behavioral standpoint, so that you know, hey, look, I don't have to do this just to get the kudos. I'm going to do this because I'm good at math and I want to minimize the interest I'm paying.
Now, remember, neither one of these are ideal, because we really don't want to be in debt if we can avoid it. But it is interesting when you look at the breakdown by account. On the retailer, remember, they had a total balance of $5,000. Well, Abigail did pay more on that debt. She paid $219 in interest, where Sam only paid $71. And actually, Abigail paid more on the middle credit card as well. She paid almost $3,300 in interest on that one, where Sam only paid $2,400. So if you kind of stop the illustration there, you'd say, man, Sam paid a lot less interest than Abigail, because, those two, he was significantly lower. However, it's because that high interest rate on that large balance just kept gobbling and gobbling and gobbling and gobbling up interest for Sam, where he paid way more interest over the life of these debts than Abigail did.
I mean, having that 29.9% credit card is like having termites in your financial household, because you didn't see the damage that's going on, the silence, but it's munching away at your opportunity in future. And that's why I do think that this is, if you are the type of person that has high interest rates, guys, try to get on the discipline train to maximize getting those high interest debts paid off as soon as possible.
Now, we didn't show it here, but the real exciting thing is, you said this, Brian, Abigail saved almost what she'd be able to max out her Roth IRA with. Think about how powerful those dollars. What she was going to do, she could go to moneyguy.com/resources and go see, man, if I took that $4,583 of interest and I invested it today, 11 months sooner than Sam did, what could that turn into by the time I retire? And it gets powerful. While that might not seem like a huge amount of money early on, that $4,600 can be huge when you take it out 20, 30, even 40 years into the future.
Yeah, so I want to talk about what's the actionable steps here. How do people need to think about this? First of all, do you have credit card debt that you're not paying off monthly? If that's the case, I do think you have to go to extreme measures. I don't care if that means, I'm from Atlanta. There was a total consumer advocate that would literally advocate putting your credit cards in a glass of water, a cup of water, like I guess you could say red Solo cup or something, putting water in it, throw it in your freezer. So you're literally freezing physically your credit card so you don't have access to it. So then you turn this into, how do we get out of debt since you're not swiping anymore? I think that's the big thing. You've got to stop digging, because credit card debt is not a shovel. It is the biggest excavator of moving earth that you've ever seen, especially credit card debt. Like I said, 30% interest. There's no way you recover from that if you don't knock it out as fast as humanly possible. And that's the part. You have to figure out, do you need to celebrate small wins? If you do, maybe the debt snowball does work for you, but it probably does mean you're paying extra interest. Whereas if you're a financial mutant, you're a person that recognizes, I am changing my life, I am building for a better tomorrow for myself, that great, big, beautiful tomorrow, by using deferred gratification today, you probably will like the debt avalanche method.
If you need some motivation, go out to the website, moneyguy.com/resources, click on our deliverable, how powerful are your dollars, and it will show you how much every dollar can be doing for you if it's in your army of dollar bills instead of working against you in debt. Debt should be a 4-letter word. It's okay to use it. It's okay to have a store retailer. It's okay to have a credit card. It's okay to have an auto loan, but you want to make sure if you are utilizing those tools, you're using them well and you're using them responsibly so that they can be tools for your wealth building journey, not tools to dig yourself into a hole that you can't get out of.
Well, I never know who's watching our videos. And in my mind, I like to think, based upon the emails and the comments you guys post, some of you are brand new to personal financing. You are starting to recognize internally, maybe you are mutating a little bit and you want to do things better, but you don't come from a household. Because you know the stat I'm going to say. 80% of millionaires are first generation, meaning their parents weren't millionaires. So you might not know how to optimize what to do with your next dollar. And it's not like there's a lot of resources out there that say, do this with your next dollar. We've actually created it. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we do have the 9 steps of the financial order of operations. Money is no different than math. You will get math wrong over and over again if you don't understand, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I mean, because that's the thing. You have to know, do you do addition first? Do you do multiplication? Do you do the parentheses? You've got to know the direct order. Money is the same way, so make sure you understand the financial order of operations. We've laid it all out for you, and we want to accelerate your process in creating success.
Now, here's what happens. We hope that you'll show up. We hope that you will learn these concepts that we are sharing with you. We hope that you'll apply it to your financial situation. And once you do get out of the debt, we hope you'll continue to grow. We'll hope that your financial empire will continue to build. And when you get to the point where maybe you don't have enough time to keep an eye on your finances, or maybe the gravity of your financial decisions is just too great, you don't want to go at it alone, or maybe you just don't know what you don't know, you'll remember the team that planted those seeds and helped start you on the abundant cycle of building towards financial independence.
Yeah, I think that's a great invitation, because look, we don't ask for anything in return. It might be years in the future that you actually reach that abundant cycle moment, but we're going to be here. We're going to keep creating free, great content for you guys, keeping investing in you, and we're just so thankful for all that you provided us so we can keep loving on you and creating more and more success. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team, out.